Chapter 6 Duel Noir Part 3. I could understand what was happening before my very eyes, but I needed plenty of time to process it. The man crawling across the floor was the NB I'd met? I knew the real NB had been killed and dismembered, but the man there before me was the spitting image of him. What does this mean? It's exactly as it appears, Big Sis Yui. This man is the true culprit, said Kirigiri, lighter at the ready. The man crawling across the floor had a small knife in his right hand, but it would probably be pretty difficult for him to wield it as a weapon when he was missing both of his legs. When did you first realize? Asked the man, raising his head to face Kirigiri. That your legs were prosthetic? Kirigiri asked in return, tilting her head. I first noticed when you stepped out of the van, but it took quite a while before I realized that information was connected to the case. Your legs were prosthetic? I timidly asked the man on the floor. He nodded. Now that I had thought about it, NB had definitely been dragging his legs along. I just assumed that it was due to an old injury. I took the legs off and hid them in a telescope in that room over there. I'd appreciate it if you brought those over here, but... well, that's probably a no-go. He smiled wryly. Who exactly are you? Tadashi Asakura, the unluckiest underdog in the world. I'd never heard of the name before, but he looked like Shita Enbi. He wasn't wearing his sunglasses, but it was undoubtedly the same face. Did you kill those 3 people, Mr. Asakura? I did, but I screwed the whole thing up. There was a refreshing smile on Asakura's face. Maybe everyone has an expression like that when they finally give up on everything. Stories like the girl told it. I called myself Yoshizono Oe and sent a job offer to 5 detectives. That was both to draw you out and to camouflage the written challenge that was also sent out. Incidentally, I sent out a letter to the real Shida NB too. I just put a meeting time that was a little earlier in his letter. You called out NB first and killed him and then dismembered him? I asked. That's right. I hid NB's body in the telescopes and in the chair. Well, I was constantly aware of the possibility that I could be found out at any time, so I took as many precautions as I could to avoid that. For example, when I was investigating the rooms within Izuka, I tried my best not to let him touch the telescopes. It was because I was there with all of you as NB that I could manage some deflection away from the corpse. I thought it was a pretty good trick. True, none of us had realized that there was someone else besides the 5 of us in the building, dead man or no. So my new life and 120 million yen vanished overnight, Asakura said as if calling out to the heavens. What is he talking about? I never thought I'd be shown up by a brand new middle school detective. I tried to pick a completely useless detective to play the culprit. Who would have thought that she would have exposed the real truth? Kyoko Kirigiri. She really did expose everything. When exactly did you realize that you were sitting right on top of the culprit's hiding spot? I asked. I considered it as one of the options from the beginning. From the beginning? Asakura was one of the most surprised by that. I didn't even move a millimeter from where I was. And I even regulated my breathing so it shouldn't have been overheard. Yes, you performed perfectly in that respect. I didn't sense a single thing from you, but logically the probability that the culprit was hiding in the chair was very high. I don't know where you would even start with that kind of logic. Consider Big Sis Yui's handcuffs. Handcuffs? Why did the culprit put handcuffs on her in a way that made them so easily removable? And why did the culprit make it so that I was holding the key? Well, obviously he wanted me to suspect you, right? That was a factor, of course, but there was another important reason. He wanted you to restrain me to the armchair using those handcuffs. When you believed I was the culprit, your first thought was to ensure your own safety by restraining me, correct? You tried to think of a way to use the handcuffs. Since you had just been restrained to the bed with them, You thought of securing the handcuffs to something else. The only things nearby were the table and the armchair. If you cuffed me to a table leg, I could lift the table and free myself. Therefore, the armchair was the only option.
I see. So, by having you sit in the chair, he made it so I wouldn't consider it in the list of culprits' potential hiding spots.
Precisely.
Well, if you knew from the beginning, you should have said something earlier.
As I said before, at first it was just one possibility. Therefore, I had you go and eliminate the other possibilities.
I see. But if I'd just investigated inside the chair first, then it would have been over, right?
That may have ended terribly. Kirigiri shot Asakura a cold sidelong glance. When I noticed the knife in Asakura's hand all over again, I went pale. Was Asakura's knife pointed at Kirigiri's back the whole time? In a way, she wouldn't notice, of course. If things stopped going his way, he was prepared to backstab her. But Kirigiri had a hunch that would have happened. Or no, maybe I should say it was more like she would. She logically determined it. Or maybe she heard the Reaper's footsteps. She probably poured the alcohol on herself while she was still sitting in the chair because she didn't want to make any sudden movements with the knife there. Or maybe that was just her way of showing her own resolve? Probably both. They had been waging psychological warfare against each other without even my noticing. While I was busy being clueless, I was shifting the burden of bracing for such a terrible thing onto Kirigiri.
How should I say this? I'm really sorry, Kirigiri.
You can save that for later, big sis. First and foremost, could you unfasten these handcuffs?
Oh, right.
I quickly unlocked the handcuffs that had been connecting Kirigiri's left hand to the armchair. She backed away from the armchair, tending to her newly free wrist.
Why in the world did you do something like this?
I asked Asakura, my voice trembling.
Was challenging me to a mystery game really enough all on its own to...
You're wrong, Asakura interrupted. I never wanted any game. He sounded as if he might continue, but he suddenly fell silent. It was the kind of silence you get when someone swallows down what they want to say. So that's how this is after all, Kirigiri muttered, brushing the hair out of her face, apparently having noticed something.
What? What's how it is?
Mr. Asakura isn't the game master, but merely another player, is what I meant.
Huh? There's someone else who set up this game? Who exactly? The true culprit? Are they one of the dead people?
Don't tell me there's another body double. Asakura slowly shook his head and began to speak. I don't really know who the people who set up this game are either. I just went along with it. It just so happened that they prepared something that I was willing to risk my life to get my hands on. You have the obligation to explain to us what you know. Kirigiri boldly approached Asakura. Surely these games have been happening in secret in many more places than this. And they will continue after this as well. We need you to lend your assistance so that no one else is victimized the way you have been. Assistance? Victimized? I barely knew up from down anymore. Big Sis Yui, on the challenge letter you received, there were numbers listed next to each item on the list, correct? Kirigiri turned to me with their explanation. Those were surely indicating their cost.
Cost?
Well, to simply put it, the cost of the tricks. Mr. Asakura bought the locations, the weapons, and the tricks that he needed to pull off this incident from the game master.
What? He what?
I started with nothing, so to me, those were my weapons to fight against the detective, Asakura offered. In a role-playing game, the hero goes to buy weapons and armor at the shop to make himself strong enough to beat the boss, right? So basically, I bought an impossible crime from those people with real-life money to beat the detective.
Someone was selling all the murders and dismemberment that happened here at the Sirius Observatory?
I can't believe it. Why would Asakura go along with this game in the first place? Would there have been some kind of prize if he won against the detective? Asakura stared down at the ground and let out a short huff before raising his head. A It's all over for me anyway. Sure, I'll tell you everything. It's not a bad idea. Wiping the smiles off the faces of those voyeurs watching us. Messing with my life like that. I hope you're all shaking in your boots right now, you pieces of shit. Asakura raised his middle finger on the hand holding the knife, threatening the empty air. I followed his gaze, but of course, there wasn't anyone on the other end of it. First of all, right, I guess I should talk about how this happened to my legs. I don't have much time. I'll make this brief, so listen up. You guys have to make yourselves a threat to those people. Or no, maybe I should say, a hope for victims like me. Asakura started telling us about his past and the serial arson case he experienced. Apparently, as a victim, his legs had been burned so badly that the only option was to amputate. The prime suspect in the case committed suicide, and so the case was settled with that. But one day, a mysterious old man appeared before him. The old man came to whisper in his ear, saying that he would tell him the true culprit. The bastard who stole my family from me and left me in this wretched state was out there living scot-free, without a care in the world. You think I could just let that slide? Of course not. I did what anyone would have done. The old man told Asakura he would reveal the true culprit on one condition. That condition was this murder case. Those people probably go around finding people like me, with the coals of revenge all ready to burn inside of them, and they instigate us to murder. The whole thing's a big show sponsored by the filthy rich.
Do things like that really actually happen?
All the proof you need is in what you experienced from yesterday up until today. Who are those people you refer to? Kirigiri asked. The old man said he was from the Victims' Catharsis Committee. He went on about catharsis like it's their slogan or something. But really, the whole thing's just to entertain some sickos I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Of course, I knew all that when I started this game. I think they call the game itself a jewel noir. Apparently they've done countless of these things.
If you knew all of that, then why did you choose to have this blood on your hands? There must have been some better way.
I trembled as I spoke. Spare me the concerned trolling. At the very least, I really could sense catharsis in what they were saying. The chance to start my life over again. Asakura summarized the jewel noir. All of it, without hiding anything from us. Once the letter of challenge was opened, I had been given 168 hours to indict the culprit. If I had failed, he would have received all the money indicated that was used to buy the tricks and so on, and on top of that, he'd be given the privilege to start a new life as a different person. It was unfortunate that his experiment had failed, but he was a murderer now. In the end, he wasn't any better than the person that he had resented for so long. The futility of it all was almost too much. It's over, Asakura shouted at the air out of nowhere. Who has he been talking to this whole time? It's game over. Hurry up and call the police here already. You're watching, aren't you?
Who exactly are you talking to?
Those bastards watching us.
Watching?
Didn't I say? The Jewel Noir is broadcasted as a show. I don't know if it's a live broadcast or not, but at the very least, there should be someone watching us on the other side of a monitor somewhere.
No way. There are security cameras somewhere?
I glanced around in shock.
There didn't seem to be anything like a camera anywhere.
Yeah, they've got to have a ton of cameras with microscopic lenses set up somewhere. I scoured the place looking for them myself, but I couldn't find a single one. We're being watched this very instant. I wrapped my arms around myself to stave off the sudden chill I felt. Incidentally, Kirigiri continued the conversation, expression as cold as ever. Upon whom were you exacting your revenge? Ko Inazuka.
Mr. Inazuka?
I repeated. That guy. That piece of shit was the true culprit behind the serial arson case.
But isn't he a detective?
Not to mention he was a Class 3 detective. Detectives don't just rise that high in the ranks every day. Wasn't that proof in itself that he was proactively cracking cases and fighting crime? A detective like that wouldn't just... What, you think that detectives can't commit crimes? You think detectives are all knights in shining armor and saints? Well, let today be the last day you ever think that. He's a goddamn fuckface. That bastard committed crimes over and over so that he could solve them and make a name for himself as a detective. He's personally sustaining his own detective business. That can't be true. It felt like everything I'd believed up until that point was crashing down around me. Weren't detectives there to protect the weak? It took me down to the very foundation of my identity. Aren't detectives heroes? Guess he really needed to pull some shit to rise up in the ranks after the DSC showed up on the scene. Though really, it's a disgrace that he managed to make it all up the way to rank 3. The world should be giving me a round of applause for this. I condemned evil to its grave. The world is better off with Inuzuka dead. But... I really couldn't find the words past that. Why did you kill Mr. Amino and Mr. Enby? Kirigiri asked. Enby looked like me, so I used him as a body double, just like you thought. Amino... Well, I thought I could use one more person for the dismemberment trick, so I picked him at random. Incidentally, you young lady, I picked you because you were the newest member. I had thought a newbie who didn't know left from right would play the role of the pitiful criminal just as planned. I see. Kirigiri crossed her arms and turned away, moving closer to the wall. In the end, even if I lost, I still got my revenge. I'm grateful to the committee in that sense. Maybe these past few days have at least saved me. I got my revenge and fulfilled my life's purpose. It's a refreshing ending, but it's about time for that to be over too. Just then I heard sirens coming from outside, signaling to us that it was time to draw the case to a close. Did the people on the other side of the monitor call the police? I swiveled my heels towards the noise. The end is nigh. Asakura tossed aside the knife in his hand. But, damn, I really panicked when I thought I might have been set on fire. There I was, sitting in the chair with a knife the whole time so I could shut the girl up when I needed to. I thought if I'm found out, I'll take her down with me. I'll kill her even if I get a game over. But I never would have thought I'd be lured out of the armchair that way. I don't think she even knew I was afraid of fire. That was reckless. He gave a pained smile towards Kirigiri behind her back. Maybe her determination broke Asakura's heart. No doubt Asakura had assumed that I would indict Kirigiri as the culprit and that would have been the end of it. And in practice, I did suspect her. If she had made one wrong move, I might have even laid a hand on her. If that had happened, then I would have never indicted the true culprit, Enby, also known as Asakura, and the 168 hours would have passed with his victory. Or else, in the worst case scenario, Kirigiri and I would have taken each other out, and then it really would have been the end of And Then There Were None. Thinking about it that way, Kyoko Kirigiri had saved me. Such a small detective solved such a big case. She had already proven her talent with no room for doubt. She had the power to fight back against crime. She was the detective that could be a real knight in shining armor. Kyoko Kirigiri was becoming more and more intriguing to me. The sirens finally stopped outside the building, and the police bustled into the hall en masse. Apparently they'd been given the details of the case because they had Asakura restrained in an instant to take him with them. We saw them off at the Building B entrance. Just as he was about to leave, Asakura told us in a low voice. The two of you might be able to end this game of theirs. If you promise you'll get back at them for me, I'll give you a hint. A hint? They take DSC ranking into account when they pick which detective gets involved in these cases. Quit running your mouth and get in the car! A policeman shoved Asakura into a black car, which then disappeared down the snowy road. The snow had mostly stopped by now, and there was only a dim light in the sky to the east. Kirigiri and I exchanged a glance, and without putting our thoughts into words, we went back together to Building A. Then we found a strange sight waiting for us. The police should have still been there, but there wasn't a single policeman to be found. "We've been had," said Kirigiri, full of regret. "What? What happened?" "Those policemen. I'm sure they were with the committee." Oh no." An hour later, the real police showed up at the Sirius Observatory. This time, I was highly suspicious of them, but they seemed to be the real deal. Kirigiri and I rode in a patrol car down the mountain, finally leaving the scene of the crime behind us. What's more, an ordinary citizen found a black car having fallen off the mountain road. In the car was a man with 2 prosthetic legs, dead from severe blunt trauma across his entire body. The police wrote it off as an accident and announced through mass media channels that there would be no further investigation. The dead man's name was given as Tadashi Asakura. Chapter 7. Daily Life. After the incident, I missed 3 days of class trying to process it. But personally, I didn't have anywhere to go back to except the old dorms on campus, which meant my classmates and dorm mates and even people like the little squirrel-like girl from the crafts club could come out of their way to express their concern. I had thought that I didn't have any close friends or even just casual pals I could rely on, but having so many people concerned for me might just make me happy enough to make up for it. I was able to reflect upon that daily life from a new perspective. Kyoko Kirigiri had apparently gone back to class at the very next day, just like normal. I heard the name Kyoko Kirigiri over the school broadcast system as she was called into the middle school staff room. It was hard for me to think of us attending the same school as just a weird coincidence. The murder case had been too surreal, and meeting Kyoko Kirigiri during it had made her just seem just as surreal. And yet, here she was, undoubtedly here in the real world as just a regular girl attending a regular middle school. 5 days after the incident, I went to peek in the middle school building during lunch break. I asked Kirigiri's homeroom teacher what classroom she was in. In the classroom were rows of young, fresh faces in their first year of middle school. Kyoko Kirigiri's among them. She was sitting by the window, propping her chin in her hands and gazing outside. All around her were girls who had pushed their desks together to eat lunch, and girls who were chatting away like chirping baby chicks. On one hand, seeing Kyoko Kirigiri in the middle of all that made her seem lonely. But thinking of it another way, she had melted completely into the background of the classroom like a shadow. A murmur went through the classroom as the girls started noticing me peeking in. Those murmurs finally spread over to Kirigiri, and at last she noticed me as well. Our eyes met. But as if nothing was amiss, she just went back to staring blankly out the window. "Wait, why are you ignoring me?" I entered the classroom and went up to stand next to her. I put my hands on my hips, staring down at her. Everyone else in the classroom was watching us now. Even the girls who had been chatting fell silent. "If it's because you don't want to talk here, then let's step outside for a bit." I dragged Kirigiri out with me, half by force. I'm sure we became the subject of a lot of classroom gossip as soon as we left. Kirigiri and I went all the way out to the deserted entrance of the building. We huddled together in the shadow of the shoe lockers, as if we were hiding. Kirigiri leaned back against one of the lockers, crossing her arms. "Do you need something?" she asked, looking up at me. She sounded indifferent, but it didn't seem like she was in a bad mood. This was probably just what she was like. "Did you hear that Mr. Asakura died? It was even in the newspaper. They're calling it an accident." "I expected that would happen as soon as I realized he had been taken by the committee. Perhaps he understood as much himself, that he had reached his end." Kirigiri looked down at the ground, letting out a sigh. "Does the committee kill the losers of the Duel Noir?" "I wonder. That may be so, at least in the event that they cannot pay for the tricks that they purchased." "No way." I put a hand on the lockers, hanging my head. Kirigiri's small head was right in front of mine. I suddenly glanced to the side and noticed a gaggle of girls in middle school uniforms watching us. When they noticed me looking at them, they quickly hid. After the incident, we were famous now, apparently. We'd been reported as ordinary people who were caught up in the case. There hadn't been any mention of us being involved as detectives.
Hey, Kirigiri, this isn't over, is it?
What do you mean?
The Victims' Catharsis Committee. We can't just leave them be. The way Mr. Asakura was talking, it sounded like lots of other games like that are happening. If that's true, we'd been turning a blind eye to criminal organizations.
Big Sister Yui. You really do intend to be a hero through and through, don't you? I was actually a little happy to hear that she was still going to call me Big Sister. Once we'd left the crime scene, I had even thought that our relationship might have reset completely, but apparently not. Those who aim to play the hero are always almost the first to die.
So you mean they put their life on the line? I replied with pride. I have the resolve to risk my life as a detective too. You don't own the rights to that one.
I suppose. Kirigiri looked up at me, her eyes were right in front of mine.
What's wrong? Does it make you anxious?
No. Kirigiri quickly shook her head, before hesitantly continuing. Ever since that day, I've been thinking about Detective Inuzuka.
A detective who solves his own crimes, huh? Just despicable.
To me, a detective has always been a disciple of the fixed and unwavering truth. So I took pride in being a detective. However... There she paused and shut her mouth abruptly, as if chastising herself for saying too much.
It's okay, you can tell me, I said.
Her gaze meandered for a moment before finally looking back up at me. Those anxious, entreating eyes were more weak and fleeting of an expression than she'd ever shown me before. Detectives are not absolute. I had neglected that obvious fact far too much. I was simply a little surprised to realize it, she said and ducked her head. I ignored the girls who were peering over at us, clearly wanting to say something, and instead I set my hand on Kirigiri's head.
Well, to me, you were nothing short of an angel who had descended with the truth. I was only able to return to my daily life because you were there.
Daily life, Kirigiri murmured, parroting the phrase as if she was unfamiliar with the term before falling silent.
Are you free after school today? There's somewhere I want to go, so do you want to come with?
Somewhere you want to go?
The detective library. The key to unlocking the secrets of the Victims' Catharsis Committee might be in there.
After a long silence, Kirigiri nodded.
Then, let's meet back here after school.
I left before I could even see her acknowledge what I had said, heading out through the front door. The middle school girls parted to let me through.
A date. It's a date,
I told them, and they squealed in a shrill reply. I heard their voices behind me as I went back to my own school building.